Budgeting for a project. Do you need to get something done? If you do, then you're probably working on a project. Most big projects need a budget. That project's budget includes cost and money, but also people and time needed to finish the project. Amateurs go over budget on projects, but you're no amateur. Today, you'll learn how to properly budget for a project. That includes learning how to plan for the worst, identifying where changes might come from, and most importantly, having a backup plan. Have a goal. Before you get into creating a project budget, you need to first determine what your project is supposed to accomplish. This means that your project needs a goal. A well-designed project will follow the SMART goal guideline. A SMART goal has 5 different parts. S. The goal is specific. There is a tangible way to measure success. M. The goal is measurable. The success of the goal can be measured. A. The goal is attainable. It can be accomplished with people and resources. R. The goal is realistic. It can be completed with people's talents. T. The goal is time-based. There is a specific deadline to complete the goal. Now that you have your project's goal outlined, you'll need to create a project budget. A project budget. What it is and how to make one. A project budget is a detailed breakdown of the costs needed to complete a specific project. A project should include things needed like money, labor, materials, services, and other resources. Why should you create a project budget? A project budget provides a detailed estimate of how much the project will cost, what the expectations are, and how people or organizations will benefit. Who is involved in a project budget? A project budget usually involves a manager, president, controller, treasurer, sponsor, organization, and a team, members working on the project. Here are the best tips for creating a project budget. Review the budgets of similar projects. Ask the president or project manager from another organization. Ask team members for estimates on the amount of time it takes to do certain things. Research how much specific materials cost. Research how much specific services cost. Have a backup plan in case you exceed your estimated cost. And determine what the weakest points of the project are. Dealing with the unknown. Some things might come up that will stop or delay your project. It's important to consider these when creating your project budget. Without it, crises may come up that might end your project permanently. Your budget estimate should have a contingency built in. It's pretty standard to have a contingency of 20 to 30% of the project's total cost. This means that if your project needs $100 in materials and 10 hours in time, then you should budget for $120 to $130 in materials and 12 to 13 hours in time. There are 2 approaches to the finances of project budgeting. When planning the financial part of your project budget, you need to know how to arrive at your total. If you request too much money, you might not get funded. If you don't request enough, then you might not be able to get enough money to cover all of your expenses. There are 2 great methods for approaching the financial part of your project budget: the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. A top-down approach is when someone comes to you with a project already in mind and asks if you can do it for X amount of money. A bottom-up approach is when you have created a project and need to find out how much each part of the project costs to complete. First approach, from the top down. For this example, we are going to create an off-campus trip in the top-down approach of creating a project budget. In this project, we'll have $1,000 to host a trip to go see a New York Yankees baseball game. Based on this goal, you'll need to create an accurate project budget to understand if the goal can be accomplished with this amount of resources. Top-down step number 1. Time. How much time is it going to take for you to put together this event? Will there be other people that you'll need to help you accomplish this? Top-down step number 2. Services. Since you'll be traveling, you'll need to be able to provide transportation for this event. How much does transportation cost? What kind of transportation should you get? Top-down step number 3. Equipment. Equipment can include a lot of different things. If you're going to an outside game, you might want to give everyone a rain poncho to stay dry. Or maybe everyone should get a t-shirt for coming on the trip. These are items you'll need to include in your budget. Reviewing the top-down approach. Once you have a detailed breakdown of the cost involved in the project, take a step back and let someone else review it. In a pinch, you can review it yourself, but having another set of eyes really helps. Make sure you cover what the budget includes and does not include. You also want to cover if the budget meets all of the project's goals. Second approach, bottom up. In the bottom-up approach to project budgeting, you'll be given a project and asked how much it would cost to complete. In this case, let's go back to our original project and ask how much would it cost to host a trip to a New York Yankees baseball game. The bottom-up approach is the most popular way to approach a project. In this approach, it's important to see exactly how you'll arrive at the total cost for the project. You will need to review all of your expenses to determine an accurate estimate of what the project will cost. Bottom-up step number 1. Time. When would you like to go on this trip? How much time will it take to plan out between now and then? You also need to consider who else you need to complete this project. Bottom-up step number 2. Services. Now is the time to think about services such as transportation to the event. Who can you get for the best price to transport everyone? Also, what are the most competitively priced tickets? Bottom-up step number 3. Equipment. Since you will try to get the most out of this event for the least amount of money, you should focus on equipment that you absolutely need to complete the project. T-shirts for this project sounds great, but do you really need them for the event? Preparing the project budget in 3 stages. Project budget management is an art of developing and managing a budget that covers all expenses and keeps the project sustainable over the long run. Preparing the project's budget can be covered in 3 basic stages. Stage 1. Estimate anticipated cost. Stage 2. Justify the budget outline. Stage 3. Ensure cost effectiveness. Preparation stage number 1. Estimate anticipated cost. The very first step in preparing a budget is to estimate project expenses to identify the cost of different project activities. This step is about line item budgeting. Line item budgeting is specific. A line item budget goes line by line. Line item budgeting identifies specific anticipated costs and then breaks those costs down into smaller and smaller items. The key to mastering this step is to understand the 3 elements needed for your budget. These include time, money, and resources. Equipment. Time. This includes people working on the project and how much time they'll spend working on each individual task. Money. This includes the financial resources necessary to complete the project and services that need to be paid for. Equipment. This includes any physical items that need to be bought or rented. This can also include renting or reserving a physical space to use for the project. Lastly, this can involve things that need to be purchased. When all the cost items are identified and estimated, you need to develop an outline of the project budget. Preparation stage number 2. Justify the project's budget. Now that you have outlined a project budget with expense details, you will need to justify your budget. This will include preparing your budget for presentation so that someone else can understand why you need these resources. This step is important because the project's budget needs to be reviewed in order to determine the necessity and reasonableness of each expense. Your justification of the project's budget is supposed to explain whether the costs are valid and sufficient to meet the project's goal. During this step, the reviewer will examine each cost for accuracy. The reviewer needs to be sure that each proposed cost is correct and reasonable. The reviewer then summarizes the budget and appraises the accuracy and appropriateness of all costs associated with the project. Preparation stage number 3. Ensuring cost effectiveness. The final step in preparing a project's budget is about evaluating the project's cost effectiveness. A budget will be effective if it fully covers all of the costs that are necessary to complete the project's goal. Through this analysis, you must examine the proposed cost estimates and identify the planned outcomes of your project. The comprehensive project budget. 2 elements are necessary for successful budget proposals. They include a project schedule, when you intend to complete a project by, as well as a resource plan, where you intend to get people, equipment, and services. This means that by identifying what needs to be done and when you need to do it, it will be the best way to determine if your project budget is successful. This can be done by chunking a project down into smaller and smaller tasks. An example of chunking down a task for the New York Yankees game is the task: get tickets for the Yankees game. Chunk 1. Find out how to purchase tickets. Chunk 2. Find out where in the stadium seats are available. Chunk 3. Find out how much those seats cost. Chunk 4. Find out how you can pay for tickets. Chunk 5. Find out how tickets get delivered. Chunk 6. Purchase tickets. Chunk 7. Receive tickets. Chunk 8. Give tickets to participants. This breaks down the big task of getting tickets into smaller and smaller tasks that can be done by one or multiple people over time. In addition, your project budget will show how much time it will take to accomplish each one of these tasks, what is required to complete each task, who will be responsible for completing each one of those tasks, and how the project will be updated once each task is completed. The total of these tasks for all related items in the project budget represent all of the resources you should need to complete the project. A key to turning a project budget into a successful project will be to build consensus among all of the people on your team. Recognize that some team members will be better skilled, more available, or better suited to completing some tasks over others. Creating a project budget in steps. Step number 1. Practice. The first project budget you write will probably not be very good. Don't sweat it. Find someone that you know and respect and has completed projects before. They will give you good tips on what it takes to put together a good project budget. Step number 2. Imitate. Find a past project that has a similar goal or outcome. Use that as a model. These past projects are gold mines for getting information on how much time, money, and manpower your project will require. Don't let these resources go to waste. Step number 3. Wants versus needs. Start out with your core cost. What do you absolutely need in money, resources, time, and people to get the project done? Then start looking at stuff that you want. These are things that would be nice to have but aren't necessary to complete the project. This will be the first draft of your project budget. Have a look at what this project is going to require. Can you get these resources? Do you need more? This budget will be a good starting point for putting together your resources. Step number 4. Get what you need. This is the time to start getting what you need to complete your project. Start requesting funding, ask your organization to work on tasks, purchase equipment and resources, and communicate with those who will benefit from your project. Step number 5. Monitor resources. Make sure that the people in your organization are working to their full potential. Outline a list of tasks that need to be done and who has the time and talent to work on them. Remember that some tasks might need to be done earlier than others. Step number 6. Keep everyone in the loop. You know what's a good way to keep everyone moving and on task? Sharing what the project has accomplished so far, how much you've spent, and how much you have left to go. This will help everyone understand where the project is at and anticipate any problems that might arise in the future. Step number 7. Stay on the project. Projects tend to get bigger over time with more goals to accomplish. Focus on one major goal if you would like to have a successful project. Everything else can be considered secondary. Trying to accomplish anything more than that requires more money, more time, and more resources. Conclusion. If you are trying to get something done, then you're probably working on a project. Most projects need a budget. Don't make the same mistake that others make and forget to include time, money, and resources in your project's budget. Before you start working on a project budget, you'll need to make sure that your project has at least one goal to achieve. That should be a SMART goal. A SMART goal is one that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Now that you have a goal defined, you can begin working on your project's budget. Remember, a project budget provides a detailed estimate of much the project will cost, what the expectations are, and how people or organizations will benefit. The best tips for creating your first project budget is review the budgets of similar projects. Ask a project manager from another organization, have a backup plan in case you exceed cost, and determine what the weakest points of the project are. There are 2 approaches to the finances of project budgeting. A top-down approach is when someone comes to you with a project already in mind and asks if you can do it for X amount of money. A bottom-up approach is when you have created a project and need to find out how much each of the elements of the project cost. Preparing the project's budget can be covered in 3 basic stages. Estimate anticipated cost, justify the budget online, and ensure cost effectiveness. Remember, the better you identify what needs to be done and when you need to do it will be the best way to determine if your project budget is successful. Now, create a project budget in 7 steps. Step number 1. Practice with someone who has done this before. Step number 2. Copy a project budget that is similar to yours. Step number 3. Balance wants versus needs. Step number 4. Get what you need. Step number 5. Monitor resources. Step number 6. Keep everyone in the loop. And step number 7. Stay on the project with a SMART goal.